Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 23rd of August of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And as you know, tomorrow is the 24th of August, the Independence Day of Ukraine, and basically, as we discussed in the previous videos, I expect that Ukrainians would try to make as much as possible before that date. They need to show the results, they need to show the progress, and the most important, they need to show people the result that they are able to achieve something. Furthermore, don't forget that during the previous days or during the previous months of counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians haven't almost got nothing on the ground. Today we got the report that the Ukrainians managed to establish control over Robotyne, and we will discuss this a little bit later. And every time when Ukrainians have problems on the front line, we need to expect some terrorist attack or some big explosion or something like this, because the Ukrainians, when they're losing, they try to change the media focus on something else, on something that is bigger and louder than the problems on the combat line. And for example, today, before we continue with significantly interesting updates, for example, today we got the piece of news in the internet that Ukrainians are planning to open another cemetery for more than 600,000 soldiers. Furthermore, the President Zelensky reported today that the military authorities asked him to increase the speed of mobilization, and the military authorities asked him to mobilize another 200,000 soldiers, another 200,000 of Ukrainian soldiers. What does it mean? When the Ukrainians are saying that they are going to mobilize 200,000 soldiers, that means that Ukrainians are going to mobilize 400,000 soldiers. The big number they are saying to people that they need to understand that they're going to be a total mobilization, but they're not saying the real numbers because they don't want people to start running away from Ukraine. So this is the first bad update, for example, for the Ukrainians of today about upcoming mobilization, about the cemetery. The Ukrainians do have a lot of problems on the combat line. They have captured, probably or not, Robotyne, and we will discuss this. They were defeated in Klishchiivka, significant number of losses, and the Ukrainians are currently of today, by the 23rd of August, before the Independence Day, they had just one option: to start terrorist attacks, to start doing something bad on the territory of Russian Federation or somewhere else, to change the focus from the bad events in Ukraine. And right before we start making this video, we got an update that aircraft in the vicinity of Moscow, on the north west of Moscow, on the southeast of St. Petersburg, in the Tver region, was shut down or just fell down by himself. Anyway, what is so special and so important in this aircraft, the sources are saying that this aircraft belonged to the head of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Currently, it's unknown whether the Igor Prigozhin was on the board or not, but maybe when you will see the video, you will already receive this piece of information regarding the absence or of Yevgeny Prigozhin on board or not. But anyway, this is a very big media attack, and if this attack was made by the Ukrainians, obviously they was trying to shut down the aircraft when Prigozhin was on board, and to give this piece of information as a victory, as the greatest victory of Ukrainian special forces before the Independence Day. So anyway, this is a part of puzzle. Of course, we can say that Prigozhin have a lot of enemies in the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, of course, but we will not discuss these possible solutions because today we have a tragedy. People were died as a result of something that happened, something with the aircraft. Now let's start with the situation on the ground, and first we're going to move to the Black Sea, because today we got a lot of very interesting updates from this territory as well. During the previous day, during almost every single day, the United States aircrafts, drones like MQ Reaper and Bayraktar were flying in the Black Sea, trying to discover and to get as much as possible information from Kherson, south of Kherson area, and the western part of Crimea. Of course, that information was provided to the Ukrainian special forces, and after that the Ukrainians launched their offensive operation. They were trying to capture the gas stations in the Black Sea. The Russians to slow down the Ukrainians and to force them to step back, send their Su-30, and yesterday the Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of attack, one boat was destroyed and the Ukrainians were forced to step back. But today we got the video video from the Ukrainian side. We see on the video how the Ukrainians were driving around the gas station, trying not to be under attack of Russian missile or something like this. And at the end of the video, we see the launch of missile from the Ukrainian boat in direction of Russian Su-30. You see the launch of missile. Furthermore, today we got another video from another Ukrainian source, basically from boat. The Ukrainians on the boat in the area of gas station were trying to shut down the Russian Su-30. Basically, when the Russians discovered the Ukrainian possibilities, they left the territory, and basically the Russians haven't managed to destroy the Ukrainian boats and haven't managed to force the Ukrainians to step back. And today we got the video how the Ukrainians, as a result of some strike, managed to destroy the Russian air defense system S-400. The sources are saying that attack probably was made not by Storm Shadows or HIMARS or something like this. Basically, the sources are saying that Ukrainians have possibility to use the British equipment to get on boats as close as possible to the let's say to the bank, to the Crimean coast, let's say like this, and from this area, from boats, the Ukrainians have possibilities to make a strike against the Russian positions, against the Russian air defense positions. So basically this is exactly what happened according to some Russian sources. The Ukrainians got the coast of Crimea, and after that they attacked this area with the weapon and missiles that United Kingdom provided them. Now let's move to, of course, we can't say that this is a significant victory, but we see that the Russians do have a lot of problems in this area, and we see the focus of the Ukrainian forces against Crimea and the southern part of Kherson as if they have some plans regarding this area. And I'll remind you that just during August we got at least 4 significant updates from the Ukrainian side. For example, on this video we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian S-300 system, and after that, as a result of HIMARS strike or Storm Shadow, the Ukrainians managed to destroy the Russian S-300. Also, we got the updates from the south of Kherson area how the Ukrainians using HIMARS were attacking the Russian infantry on the islands. And in this video we saw another video how the Ukrainians using HIMARS destroyed the Russian squad who had some military exercises. So we see that Ukrainians are trying to clear this area to establish 100% control domination in this area, and based on the facts and geolocated facts we can't say that they can't do this. We can't say that they're not able to implement the situation. Basically, we see a very fierce battle, the battle of the Black Sea. From the Russian side, we see how the Russians are bombing and attacking with missiles the Ukrainian ports like Reni, Izmail, Odessa, trying to suppress and to destroy the energy facilities, port facilities, military facilities in this area. From the Ukrainian side, we see significant number of missile and rocket launches on direction of Crimea and South Kherson district. The battle of the Black Sea is going to continue, and the only possible solution for the Russians is somehow to launch some operation and to capture Odessa. Without this operation, I believe that the Russians don't have possibility to secure this area from the Ukrainian attacks. But we understand what price the Russians will pay if they start any operation against the Odessa. They need significantly big army. And one more time, before we continue about mobilization, one more time, the Ukrainians are planning to announce another 200,000 mobilization. But currently the Russians have some reserves, but these reserves they have is enough to stop and defeat the Ukrainians on the combat line. Another 200,000 or 400,000 of Ukrainians anyway will force the Russians to launch their own mobilization, because the forces they have is not enough to stand against another wave of mobilization from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move to Kherson area. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce artillery bombings, not even artillery bombings, currently it's drone attacks, the Ukrainians lost 20 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. On this video we see how the Russians discovered the Ukrainian howitzer, and as a result of onset strike the howitzer was destroyed. Now we're moving to Robotyne, and according to the latest update we got, the Ukrainians, as a result of fierce clashes, as a result of storming operation, as a result of very fierce assault, managed to establish control over the main town, or the main building in the southern part of Robotyne. As I understand, this is the town hall, or let's say school, some building that belongs to local authorities. It's not like a private building. So basically, as I understand, this is the building that can be determined as the main center of the building, and if you are able to establish control flag of the building, that means that the settlement is under your control. So the Ukrainians captured the building right before the beginning of the Independence Day. So Zelensky already have few updates to give his people after or while making mobilization, because from one side he has a bad piece of news regarding mobilization, and now he can show the photo and video of Robotyne and tell the Ukrainians that we are winning and we can make another mobilization, and people will eat this piece of news without any problems. Anyway, what was that? What did happen? Why the Russians were forced to step back? And today we got a lot of geolocated videos from this bridgehead. So what did happen? Basically, the Ukrainians made two attacks. The first attack, as usually, was going along the road to the southern part of Robotyne. The Ukrainians were attacking in this direction using armored vehicles. Another attack took place in the eastern direction of the settlement, and the Ukrainians managed to redeploy some more mechanized forces, and using a lot of armored vehicles and infantry, the Ukrainians were pushing to the south, trying to force the Russians to step back to the south as well. We had a lot of video and photo confirmations from the Russian side, how they were attacking and destroying the Ukrainian armored vehicles in Robotyne and so on. Furthermore, lots of Russian sources reported about the fact the situation is under Russian control, that as a result of a small regrouping, the Russians managed to launch a counterattack and to force the Ukrainians to step back to the northern part and so on. Maybe all these updates and all those pieces of news are correct, but there was another situation, another wave of attack from the Ukrainian side, and that attack took place on very deep in the eastern direction from Robotyne. And when talking about this direction, mainly the Ukrainians were using just infantry to attack the Russian positions. There were no armored vehicles, there were no tanks, there were just infantry, light infantry that were moving along the forest lines, and the main purpose and the main goal of that attack was to establish control over the trenches, over the forests, over the fortifications that located between Robotyne and Novopokrovka. So basically the Ukrainians were planning and were trying to establish control over this area. And if the Ukrainians were able to capture this area, of course, that would be the operational or even a cauldron of the Russian forces who left or who stayed in the southern part of Robotyne. The Russians, of course, saw everything. They discovered that attack, and during all way long, the Russians were bombing and shelling the Ukrainians with drones. Significant number of drones attacks, significant number of forces were destroyed as a result of those attacks by the Russian forces. Probably up to from 1 to 200 of soldiers were killed or damaged or wounded as a result of that attack. But the Ukrainians were continuing moving. They were moving and moving very slowly to the south, just with infantry, and at some point of the day we got another video how the Ukrainians started bombing and shelling these forest line between Robotyne and Novopokrovka, and basically the Ukrainians made a, let's call it, artillery preparation before the final storm of the Ukrainian forces in this direction. So as soon as the Ukrainians, as you can see, the Ukrainians were using artillery shells, cluster rounds, all types of weapons they have. So basically as soon as the Ukrainians got this line, the Ukrainians started bombing these fortifications. Probably that was artillery preparation. They managed to suppress the forces, probably to force some forces to step back. And after that, there was another attack. And probably that was the reason why the Russians took a decision to step back. They realized the risks of being encircled by the Ukrainians. And because of that, they took a decision to step back to the south and to leave Robotyne at all. I'm not saying that the Russians are not going to return control over the settlement. Probably they will make attempts during the night to counterattack, because tomorrow is Independence Day, and of course the best thing the Russians can do is to return control over the settlement. But from the other side, we understand that Ukrainians, after the video of the flag of Ukraine flag in the, above the town hall, they will not count the reserves and manpower, and they will send more and more forces inside of the settlement. So probably, and there are very high chances that the Russians will not be able to return back control over the settlement. Not because they can't. Yes, they can, but whether it's smart to pay such a big price for the ruins. Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe it's better to step back, to regroup, and to get ready before the next wave of Ukrainian attacks that obviously will be. Well, even, of course, when talking about the new waves of mobilization. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce fightings on the Bradley Square, the Ukrainians lost 180 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, and 6 artillery systems. The Russians, according to the information, managed to repel 4 attacks, but we see that that wasn't enough. Now we're moving further. While we're moving further to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead, the Russians and the Ukrainians restored their activity in this area. If you remember, we discussed that Ukrainians, after the fall of Robotyne, launched their offensive operation among the fields. They were completely defeated, and furthermore, they were forced to step back. And after that, the Russians managed to restore their positions in the fields, and basically by today, by the 23rd of August, the Russians managed to restore control over the fields, and currently this is the Russian bridgehead foothold between Urozhaine, Zavitno-Bazhanye, Novodonetsk, and Kremenchuk. And by the way, while making this video, I got a report from my assistant that Evgeny Prigozhin was in the list of persons on board of the airplane that was shot down in Tver region. So probably there are very high chances that Ukrainian special forces managed to shut down Evgeny Prigozhin, the head of Wagner. So we'll see. Let's follow. Maybe this is speculation or attempt to make the situation hot. So we'll see. Anyway, the Ukrainians continue clearing. So as after the Ukrainians were forced to step back towards Makarovo, Urozhaine, and the Russians managed to capture the forest lines in this area, and the Ukrainians started everything from the beginning. We got the video how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian ammo depot, and as a result of artillery strike, they destroyed that ammo depot. We have another video how the Ukrainians were using the tank, were bombing and attacking the Russian positions in the forest with their tank. So we're just using these videos to geolocate and to confirm that the Russians managed to restore their positions in the fields between the settlements. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce clashes in this area, as a result of artillery strikes, as a result of bombings and shelling, the Ukrainians lost another 145 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, including one tank and 1 artillery system. Furthermore, we got another video from the Russian Ka-52 that show us the work and the results of missile strike against the Ukrainian tanks and armored vehicles between the fields somewhere in the vicinity of Urozhaine. As a result of, as you can see in the video, as a result of strikes, few more armored vehicles were destroyed. Now we are moving further to the South Donetsk area, and we got a lot of very interesting updates from this bridgehead, a lot of updates from Krasnogorovka, just one update from Novomikhailivka. The Russians continue storming operation in the direction of the settlement from the north and from the south, and currently the Russians are trying to clear and suppress the Ukrainian forces using drones. On this video, we see how the Russians discovered the Ukrainian artillery system, and as a result of drone strike, that artillery system was destroyed. Then there was a fire and explosion. Now we are moving further to Krasnogorovka, and we got also a lot of very interesting videos. The Russians continue suppressing the Ukrainian positions in the side of Krasnogorovka itself, using the air forces, guided bombs, artillery strikes, all types of weapons they have. Currently, there are a lot of Ukrainian forces inside the settlement, and there are still a lot of jobs to do before the Russians are able to launch offensive operation, not even capture. This the main base of 79th Brigade, they're located there. And as you can see, as a result of another strike against the industrial area, probably the Russians managed to destroy some accumulation of forces or at least ammo depot. Furthermore, the Russians launched artillery preparation against Ukrainian positions on the west of the coal mine. They were bombing and shelling this area every day, and this reminds me the beginning of something bigger like offensive operation, and that was some kind of artillery preparation. So basically the Russian plans, of course, before the next further offensive operation to Krasnogorovka is to capture the fields and to develop their bridgehead in the vicinity of coal mine. But we can't say that everything is so good for the Russians in the coal mine. This is a very tough position. For example, today we got a very interesting video how currently the Russians are trying to supply and support their forces in the coal mine. They can't use armored vehicles, they can't use infantry because there are hundreds of Ukrainian drones who controls the fields, and if the drones see any movement, of course the drones start attacking the fields with cluster rounds, with artillery. So the only one way how the Ukrainians have possibility to support their forces in this stronghold is using drones. On this video we see how the drone brought the Russian forces in this area cigarettes, food, water, paper, everything necessary for the infantry just to survive and to hold this position. Very interesting situation, very interesting position, and very interesting solution from the Russian side. So this way they can also bring them some pizza, I believe so, or something like this. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce clashes on Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians lost 180 soldiers, 6 armored vehicles, and 4 artillery systems. When talking about Klishchiivka, we haven't received almost nothing from this area, just few videos how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking and trying to suppress the Russian artillery that the Russians hide or tried to hide inside of Artyomovsk. On this video we see destroyed Russian South Tulpan, or howitzer Tulpan, as a result of FVP drone strike. Now we are moving further to the Siversk bridgeheads. After a few days of small pause, we start receiving more updates. The Ukrainians are extremely focused on the Lysychansk coal refinery. This is a very big stronghold, the best area to hide, to have some storage, to have some warehouse, ammo depots. There are a lot of underground facilities. There are a lot of equipment, a lot of places where the Russians can hide this equipment. And of course, the Ukrainians try to use this situation and they try to attack and to bomb and to provide more and more geolocated confirmations of another attacks against the Russian positions. From the Russian side, we got the video how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians inside of Siversk. The Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian operational ammo depot, local ammo depot, and as a result of artillery strike, that ammo depot was destroyed. When talking about Liman front line, we haven't received almost nothing. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in the vicinity of Liman, the Ukrainians lost another 60 soldiers, but as you can see, there are no changes on the ground. Very difficult situation in Kremenaya Forest. The Russians try to push, but they can't rely on a very big progress. They can capture just a few square meters before the next very long operational pause. The area is very difficult. The only thing they can do, the Russians, is to bomb and attack this territory with missiles, with rockets, with everything they have, just to burn and to set this forest on fire and to force the Ukrainians to step back. When talking about Kupiansk, we haven't received nothing. Like today, we haven't received updates regarding Sinkovka. So basically, I have changed the map, and now I'm showing the map, this settlement, as in the gray zone. And today we got more geolocations from the northern part, which confirms that this settlement either in the gray zone or at least under Ukrainian control. For example, in this video, we see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian artillery systems and their armored vehicles inside of the forest to the north of Sinkovka, and the Russians were bombing this area with the grenades, with drones, with FEP drones, the Ukrainian infantry, so which confirms the Ukrainian control. Anyway, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost around 170 soldiers, 9 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems as a result of clashes in this area. So today is 23rd of August. Very interesting situation one more time with the jet, business jet of Evgeny Prigozhin. I believe that when you're gonna see the video, you're gonna see everything and details regarding the plane. Currently it's 8 p.m. of the local time, and by today we just known that Prigozhin was in the list and that his business jet was shut down between St. Petersburg and Moscow, and there are very high chances that Prigozhin was also on board. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.